They didn't move on, they moved in, spiritually. Your heart was frozen with your name still echoing in their hands. They wept to a seer, not God. You weren't numb. You were bound in their grief. You escaped their arms, not their rituals. Their tears became commands in the spirit. You were the prayer. They turned you into a spell. Your silence was bought with spiritual currency. They asked for closure, then cursed it. You weren't left. You were claimed. They couldn't own your future, so they caged your heart. That wasn't heartbreak, that was interference. They whispered your name to shadows, not angels. Your light frightened them. They froze it. They disguised control as devotion. You were never free, just frozen. You didn't stop feeling, they stopped you. They swore love, but summoned delay. They laid candles where you once laid your head. The cord wasn't emotional, it was spiritual. You're not crazy. They conjured you in secret. Your name is still pinned under their altar. They chose ritual over repentance. You weren't abandoned. You were spiritually chained. They found your picture, then found someone who could bind. You never ghosted, they gripped. They didn't miss you. They monitored you. That wasn't nostalgia. That was possession. Your name has been placed in oil and silence. They couldn't let you go, so they paused your becoming. Their regret became obsession. They locked you in memory and magic. You gave goodbye. They returned with binding. They still hold your spirit like a token. They fed your name to the moon. You've been healing from a curse, not a heartbreak. They begged the universe to never release you. You were the altar. They brought you as offering. They wrapped you in silence and called it grief. You didn't stop loving. Your heart was restrained. Their fingers still trace your name in secret. You didn't fall out of love. They pushed you off course. You didn't lose direction. You were spiritually delayed. They loved your soul, then shackled it. There, I miss you was spiritual sabotage. They wanted you stuck, so they wouldn't feel left behind. You were the spell they hoped would never break. Your photo still sits beside their candle. They anointed your absence in envy. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, like, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. You're not numb. You're recovering from enchantment. They didn't cry, they conjured. You were a soul, not their souvenir. They asked for your silence, not your healing. They prayed your heart would forget how to open. Your joy threatened their control. They couldn't keep your body, so they kept your name. That sadness wasn't yours. They anchored you with grief dressed as love. You were light they couldn't hold, so they dimmed you. You weren't alone. You were still spiritually followed. You were not the one obsessed they were. Their heartbreak became a spiritual trap. They buried your name in wax and want. They fed your memory to the fire. You've been breaking free in your sleep. The heaviness isn't depression, it's residue. They mourned with spells, not surrender. Your spirit knew before your eyes did. They never moved on, they moved into your space. You didn't forget love, they froze it. They disguised obsession as unanswered love. You were their possession, not their partner. You keep dreaming of them, they keep calling your name. Their energy visited long after their body left. You weren't weak. You were being worked against. They didn't light candles for healing. You were prayed against, not prayed for. They gave you to a power that demands silence. They didn't accept closure. They cursed it. That heartbreak was entangled with interference. You still walk with strings attached to their altar. You weren't confused. You were conjured. Your detachment had their fingerprints on it. Their grief became greed. They wanted you paused so they could feel powerful. They marked your name in dust and mirrors. You were their ritual. You didn't lose them. They spiritually kept you close. You were a vow they never released. You've been under surveillance of their soul. You didn't choose silence, it was chosen for you. You've been resisting what they locked. That feeling of being watched, it isn't imagined. You were not left. You were looped. Their soul never let go. Their hands only pretended. You gave peace. They returned with power plays. You weren't stuck. You were spiritually snared. Their guilt became a grip. They lost you and couldn't accept the truth. They called it closure, but it was a contract. You are not trapped, you are awakening. They tried to pause your heart in their name. That coldness wasn't natural. They summoned silence where there should have been release. You've been picking pieces of yourself out of spiritual cement. They kept your name in ritual, not memory. You were the spell they lit, hoping you'd never feel again. They saw your light, then froze it. You didn't slow down, they sealed you in grief. You loved. They plotted. Their goodbye was a setup. You are rising from what they spiritually tried to bury. They lit incense, not to bless you, but to bind you. You weren't blocked, you were spiritually bound. They still sleep near your name. They wrote your initials into something sacred and selfish. You left the relationship. They clung to your essence. That heaviness isn't yours. It's what they fed you. They marked your memory with frozen fire. Your joy felt like betrayal to their pain. You became a ritual they revisit, secretly. They didn't want peace. They wanted pause. They saw your healing as distance and punished it. They prayed your heart would stay cold. You were loved, then locked. They carry your name in bottles and shame. Your name still sits in a sealed place. You were the altar, not the offering. You didn't drift. They dragged your spirit back. You've been crying tears that never belonged to you. That knot in your chest wasn't heartbreak. You didn't stop loving. You were spiritually sedated. You weren't abandoned. You were held in spiritual stasis. Their love turned to rituals the moment you let go. Your name didn't fade. It was frozen. Their grief was a net. You were kept emotionally cold by their choice. They cloaked your name in shadows. You didn't forget. They tried to erase. Their love ended. Their attachment did not. They spoke your name into silence, not surrender. You were a soul, not a trophy. Your energy felt heavy because it wasn't just yours. You are thawing now. They marked your love with a lock. You are not theirs. Not anymore. You were targeted, not treasured. You are breaking free of every name spell. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. They didn't grieve you. They tried to possess what they couldn't protect. Your name was spoken where no love lives. They didn't pray for peace. They paid for control. Your heart was not yours in their hands. Their love ended, but their obsession grew fangs. They tied your name to silence. You weren't mourned, you were manipulated. They wanted your pulse, not your presence. They paid for you to feel nothing. Their grief built a cage, not an altar. The moment you walked away, they walked into shadows. You left. They cursed. They didn't move on. They froze time around your spirit. Your name was burned into candles meant for bondage. They couldn't live without you, so they tried to pause you. You thought it was numbness. It was enchantment. You loved them. They hexed you. You gave warmth. They responded with ritual. Their tears became instructions for a curse. You were marked, not missed. They summoned silence, not healing. They cloaked their obsession in grief. You weren't healing slowly. You were spiritually frozen. They didn't let you go. They followed you spiritually. Love never asked them to do that. They didn't miss you. They wanted to mute you. You thought you lost them, but they refused to lose you. You walked away. They whispered incantations. Your energy wasn't fading. It was bound. They visited a seer with your name on their lips. They chanted when they should have confessed. You weren't cold. You were cloaked. They laced your name into spells. They never let your love breathe. They didn't honor your leaving. They fought it spiritually. You've been fighting a silence that didn't begin with you. You've been tired ever since they let go. They didn't want closure. They wanted control. Their love wore robes. They couldn't have your body, so they targeted your spirit. You weren't grieving. You were gripping chains they forged. Your softness became their sacrifice. They lit candles to own what they broke. Your detachment wasn't natural. They sang your name into a bottle. They didn't cry over you. They conjured you. You're not behind, just recovering from their rituals. They offered you to a power that wasn't God. They didn't want your joy to outlive them. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. They sought a seer to seal your name to theirs. You didn't imagine it. Your peace was tampered with. You were bound by someone who couldn't bear your light. They loved the idea of you too much to release it. They didn't ask God to help. They asked someone else to stop you. They made your freedom their enemy. Your heart's still defrosting from the spell they paid for. They prayed you'd never love again. They couldn't accept silence, so they called on shadows. Their love turned dark the moment you healed. You've been spiritually quieted by hands you once held. You weren't left in peace. You were spiritually tethered. They lit incense with your photo near. You became their ritual, not their release. You carry a ghost that isn't yours. They stopped loving, but they never stopped binding. They carved your name in places you never entered. You were frozen in time by someone who couldn't grow. That ache in your chest isn't yours. They made a deal to dim you. Your soul knew before your mind did. You weren't tired, you were trapped. They gave your name to a stranger with candles. You were meant to rise. They paid for your pause. They turned your name into a spell of stillness. You were cursed by a crying heart. They wanted you stuck, not safe. They watched your glow dim and smiled. You lit their world, they froze yours. You were the light they resented too deeply. Their grief became your invisible prison. They sat in silence, plotting spiritually. You didn't choose numbness. It was placed on you. You walked into freedom, they followed in secret. Their last, I love you, came with a ritual. They fasted to make you feel nothing again. They didn't want you healed, they wanted you haunted. They can't stop watching what they spiritually tethered. You weren't broken, you were bound. They keep your old things for spiritual leverage. You still dream in places they visited with candles. They spelled your name into silence. They replaced grace with control. Your name is buried under rituals they swore were love. They kissed you, then conjured you. You offered forever. They responded with incantation. You carry a spell you never asked for. Their obsession became a prison. Your light was frozen, not forgotten. They moved on, with your soul in their grip. They didn't release you, they rerouted your path. You felt blocked because someone spiritually held your name. They traced your initials in wax. Your smile didn't fade, it was bound. They sealed your softness for personal power. You gave closure, they gave curses. You've been quiet since their last ritual. They wanted you lonely so they could still feel needed. You never forgot them, they spiritually followed you. They spelled out your name with grief and greed. Your tears were not your own. That ache was a spell breaking. You've been under their grief's spell too long. They worshipped your memory until it turned into bondage. You gave freedom, they forged shackles. They couldn't move on, so they made sure you couldn't either. You were a poem they tried to control. They still call your name during moon rituals. You didn't feel heavy, you were hexed. They never left. They lingered spiritually. You weren't cold-hearted. Your love was frozen in their altar. They whispered lies into prayer. They signed your name in candle smoke. Your joy triggered their jealousy. They couldn't hold you, so they held your spirit. You were the altar. They were the thief. You never imagined it. You endured it. They used your absence as access. Their obsession became a ritual of ruin. They cursed your future because you didn't choose them. You weren't attached, you were under attack. Their memory of you mutated into obsession. They cried to someone who cursed you quietly. You were a heart they saw hostage. They buried your name in mirrors. You were light, too bright for their control. Your heart was frozen in their grief. They carved a delay into your timeline. You were not moving slowly. You were spiritually resisted. You've been untangling the knots they tied in secret. They held your essence hostage. Your name was never safe with them. You weren't protected. You were preserved in spiritual ice. They named you daily in private shadows. Their closure was a spiritual contract. You've been reclaiming what they refused to release. You are melting out of their spell. Your name is leaving their altar forever. Heaven never agreed to what they did. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more.